Hello, everyone. My name is JJ Richa, and I am with Pismo Ventures. Welcome to our live stream. So this is our second one today. I wanted to, I have Jim Pickell as my guest today. We will get to him and to introduce him in a few minutes. Before we get started, just wanted to explain the format of our program. Jim, maybe you can mute because there's some feedback. Sorry. So our program is about an hour. After introductions, we will have about 30 minutes or so of open discussions. Then we will have, it will be followed by an open Q&A session. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the entire program using your YouTube chat box. We will be answering questions throughout the entire program. Also, we will do our best to answer all the questions. If we are unable to answer the questions, please don't hesitate to email us at pvinfo@pismoventures.com. If there are specific questions for Jim, I will forward to him. Please note that there is about a little bit of delay. You will not feel it yourselves, but there's about 10 seconds delay between when we say something and when you hear it. All right, so to get started, the purpose of Pismo Ventures live stream is to help startups, entrepreneurs, and the ecosystem understand and navigate our vibrant community by bringing on board thought leaders, investors, serial entrepreneurs, movers, shakers, etc., who can add value to our listeners by providing pertinent information about the current climate, investment news, what it takes to be investable, what it takes to build, grow, exit a business, and everything in between. That's the whole purpose. A little bit about Pismo Ventures, just to give you just a little bit information about what we do. So we help businesses build their startup, regardless of what stage they're in. Usually anywhere between Series A, pre-seed through Series A. We have also a software development arm. We can help you develop software. We invest resources. We facilitate funding. We open doors. We are building a fund. Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have a fund that can also participate in our company, in our portfolio companies. We are a hybrid cash and equity model, and we engage on a month-to-month basis, no long-term commitment, and we are a true business partners with our portfolio companies. That's a little bit about us. Before I get started and introduce Jim, you're on YouTube today, so click that subscribe button. It's really easy to do, so please do that. Also follow us on social media using the emails that you've received, and also potentially you can go to our website pismoventures.com and follow us there. Click that YouTube subscribe for us to help us track you, and also to help you be abreast of all upcoming events. All right, we're excited to have Jim Pickell today. Jim is a TCA Orange County fund manager. He led the effort of creating a new fund for Tecos Angels Orange County. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Welcome, Jim. Thank you for being our host today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, JJ. Thanks for having me here. This may be a little background. I started as an M&A attorney, and then rather than being in the service business, I moved to operating companies. First as an executive at Sony, both in LA and Tokyo. I always, I really like building things. I like the creativity, and I like being on the cutting edge of technology. At Sony, we brought together 5 studios to form the first digital distribution platform of motion pictures over the internet. So that was an exciting time. And then I left, I think, in 2007 to start, co-found my first startup, which was openenglish.com. And, you know, what a time and learning experience back at a similar crisis. But we went on through that tremendous learning experience. We went on to raise $160 million. And that's where I was first exposed to angel investing. We raised our first capital from Pasadena Angels. So, you know, I certainly feel I can relate to being an entrepreneur in the market today. As the chair of Tech Coast Angels Fund in Orange County, I'm working closely with early stage companies. The goal really for us and me is to help them scale and become fundable. And Tech Coast Angels, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's one of the top or largest angel networks in the United States. And by the fund, I really hope and am working so that we become the first phone call CEOs make raising their first $1 million or so, you know, after their friends and family. And beyond capital, though, like yourself, JJ, we offer counseling, mentoring, and access to just a really incredible network of people. And while everyone is an investor, as an angel, I think the vast majority are doing it because they find this is an incredible way to give back of some of their learnings. My personal goal for the fund is to fund 100 to 150 companies in the next year, in the next 10 years. And I think we're off to a really good start. We launched just earlier this year, and I hope in the next week or two we'll have closed our third investment.
Oh, there you go. So we will get a little bit into that, but I'm curious about that picture behind you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, you like that? Yeah, so I put that there to remind me how my family used to practice social distancing. My wife's from Italy, that's her region, and usually we try to visit her family as much as possible. So that's a picture of my family spending time social distancing in the Italian Alps pre-COVID, but it's also something that gives me motivation to look forward to the rainbow on the other side of this.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Well, talking about COVID. Okay. So is it safe to say that COVID has diminished the feasibility of some of your goals and those of entrepreneurs as a whole?
I think COVID resulted in all of us, taking a big step back and reassessing our priorities and what we're trying to accomplish. But, to the contrary, as an entrepreneur, I couldn't be more excited about what I see happening in the market. I think it's just an incredible time to be an entrepreneur. New businesses tend to be a lot more nimble so that they can act on changes in the macroeconomic climate. There's certainly a better talent pool available with 15 to 25% unemployment, and people have time available. So it's easier to assemble great minds. And like in 2008 for us at Open English, it's an incredible time to buy advertising. Back in 2008, it changed our entire business by finding remnant inventory over television and working through a really creative rev share deal when we didn't have the cash to buy TV commercials. So, and there's just a lot less competition in the market right now as the bigger companies are focused on how to survive and shore up their balance sheets. Smaller companies can look at how to capitalize on short-term opportunities and grow into something bigger. And, if you think about what really makes an entrepreneur, for most of us, it's this real drive to solve problems. And we're surrounded by big problems right now, and big problems need big leaders and big solutions. So, I'm just really excited about the ideas I see out there, and the leadership, and how much innovation is happening right now.
A lot of innovation, and a lot of really great startups flourished during really downtime. Can you give us some examples on, some of the sectors that you find interesting, or maybe some of the sectors that maybe TCA should be looking at?
Yeah, well, there's sort of three types of sectors right now. I think one are sectors that may be hurt or will be hurt by COVID. Others would argue they're neutral, and people are trying to figure out the impact, and others are actually positively impacted. I remember back in 2001 when China won the bid for the 2008 Olympics. I read a statistic that more people were learning English in China than all the people speaking English in the United States. And that shift was just this major tectonic shift that, once it happened, you never revert back to where you were before. And I think in the last few months, we've seen more innovation than probably most of us have seen in a lifetime, and acceleration compressed really out of necessity. So the opportunities I see, just to give you a couple examples, and the list is really long, in life sciences and healthcare. I think probably a week ago, it's probably grown since then, I read there were 70 companies now in the race to find a vaccine for COVID, and using supercomputers and new approaches to clinical trials during social distancing. I can't imagine there's ever been that level of commitment and coordination in healthcare. And I think, the confidence that a vaccine will be found on what effectively has been, COVID or the coronavirus has been on the list of one member that makes up the common cold. I'm not saying it's not a lot more serious. I'm saying we've never been able to cure the common cold, and now there's this mad race to find a cure for one of its family members. So that's obviously exciting. I think that's probably that sector is probably the most resilient right now. Distance learning, before pre-COVID, I think 30% of college students were taking at least one class in distance learning or online education. And I don't know the statistics now, but I imagine it's 100, and I don't think you ever go back to that 30%. E-commerce, every year, the big statistic is how many people shop for Christmas online, and it goes up every year, and it doesn't go back. And both on cell phones and just online. And I'm sure we'll break all records this holiday season. Restaurants are sort of a tricky space right now, but I think you're going to see a lot of innovation. I mean, Panera Breads became a grocery store of sorts to become an essential business. They're offering takeout liquor. And takeout's becoming a huge and critical part of their business. Even restaurants that resisted that, it makes Travis Kalanick of Uber look really brilliant right now, and the major investment he made in cloud kitchens, because that's I think he invested $400 million before all this, and it's pretty clear the writing's on the wall. I was looking at a home fitness company. And now I'm a big believer, after buying a Peloton finally a few weeks ago to just stay sane. And the CEO said that internally they call this COVID-15 because they're finding everyone's put on 15 pounds by staying at home. And we're all looking for ways to stay sane around our family.
Yep.
And then, obviously, even in this call, I think the remote workplace Historically, I think we dipped our toe in, we tested it to get good talent, maybe in other locations, or to offer a family benefit. And
that's going to change quite a bit. Yep.
I think companies are now looking at it as this may be a core part of their workforce strategy in the future. And how do they improve efficiency by embracing it more than they have before? And then travel is just, I wouldn't call it one of the bright spots. I think that's really been hit hard. But over the weekend, my wife taught a class with a friend in Italy how to make lasagna. And I asked what she was doing, and she said, "Oh, you don't know? Airbnb now has a channel called Experiences, and they're really encouraging."
Airbnb is pivoting.
To me, it's I looked at a travel business, and maybe I made a mistake telling someone, now is not the time for travel, and then you see what Airbnb did, and I think it's just one of the most incredible and brilliant pivots. Massive amount of content and learnings going online across culture, and I think it's really exciting to watch how even a travel company can use this opportunity to reinvent themselves.
That's really amazing. So we have a question from Sandy. I thought it's really a good question given the COVID. He's thinking that is it really a good thing? And this is going to be 6 months or so.
I tend to avoid sectors that I don't know a lot about. And by that, I don't mean we don't invest as a fund. I mean, I rely heavily on people that are a whole lot smarter than me, and especially in healthcare, genetics. So I think there are absolutely short-term opportunities, or there wouldn't be 70 companies investing to find a vaccine, and it's not all altruistic. I think everyone wants to find a cure, but some companies are going to do very well by this. So I would never discourage that. Whether it's something that will be valuable after all this, I think that's just really difficult to tell. I liken where we're at now to being deep in the fog, and our fog lights, we're trying to get them to look out further in the future, and we don't know 6 months or 1 year or 2 years how deep and long this will run. But if you're small and nimble and you're a coder and can put out an app that's useful, that could create a tremendous opportunity for you.
I think there are a lot of things that not just the short term, but like you said, from the social distancing, from meeting via a Zoom or a web conference, to how the businesses are going to change moving forward. There are a lot of things related to healthcare and everything around it. But talking about that, which is really encouraging. But aren't entrepreneurs facing much bigger challenges right now?
Well, there's no question it's an incredibly challenging environment, and in ways we've never experienced before. I think one of those is just the level of uncertainty. So, if historically you have a mild or deep recession, we have models as to what that most likely will look like, and we have variables we can plug in, and we can take a certain level of risk and probably understand what that is. Yeah. I think with COVID, the unprecedented nature of this is makes it really difficult. It's beyond risk, it's uncertainty, the depth and duration of this. And if worldwide we're having challenges modeling out the fatality rate or the exposure rate or the rate of antibodies, it seems to me that even the most brilliant economists are going to have challenges modeling the global economic impact, and that uncertainty makes it really difficult to make major decisions for individuals and companies. I think we're all waiting for some of the dust to settle. I sent you a slide that I found fascinating. I don't know if you can share it.
I have it on the screen. Yeah, it's really amazing, actually. Here it is.
So that statistic just blew me away. And you know, one thing I've realized about myself is I think we're all more than ever susceptible to confirmation bias and think we know how things are going to play out because of what we've seen in life, experiences we've had, and we probably do a pretty good job about it. But the fact that the media is so effective at reaching us with the type of news we want to read makes us so susceptible to confirmation bias. And I tend to be a very optimistic person. I saw this slide and I think my jaw really hit the floor. It's not so relevant to startups per se, but what it illustrates is that some industries, their sales haven't just dropped, they've plummeted or stopped entirely. And the cash position the average restaurant owner is in, or, you know, pick your sector as shown on this slide, shows just how vulnerable we are to an inability to fund our businesses and our companies. And some of this is related to increasing dependence on credit and equity capital as well. So I think
cash is king.
Cash is king. Entire industries are vulnerable right now, and you know, restaurants are on the far left side. It's in small font on my screen, but I think it was 16 days is the average restaurant owner's cash position that they could survive without an influx. Fortunately, our government recognized how significant of an issue that is, but my prediction is that, and I think we're already seeing this, you know, some of my favorite restaurants have a for lease sign up in front, that the restaurants, if they reopen, they're going to be in a different format, in a different location, and you know, they're biding time and trying to tread water right now.
It's really all about innovation right now. What can you do? How can you pivot? What do? Do you stay the course, or do you change? Well, it's changing. You better change. I have a question here. I think it's relevant. With the black swan effect on the stock market, are startup investors slowed, pivoting their funds into other investments like equity in startups, or hunkering down?
I think the public markets are more of a leading indicator that right now the volatility is directly correlated to the level of uncertainty. You know, there's a big camp in the highly bullish and a big camp in the bearish, and they fight it out on a weekly basis. I don't think that that's yet entirely caught up with private investments. I think there were deals that are still working their way through the system. But yes, I do think that will certainly work their way into angel and VC funding as well.
Okay, I have another question from Caitlin. Are there opportunities to pitch to VCs that you don't have existing relationships with, given the current climate? And followed by, what are your recommendations for companies looking to raise capital?
There's always an opportunity to raise funding, and some of the most successful companies were raised in times of trial. And as I said, I worked through 2008 and 2009, and it was challenging. But I think the current environment makes the shifts we're seeing almost more critical and necessary for some businesses. And, you know, I already highlighted some of those industries. So I think VCs are always interested in innovation. And I think that right now they're looking at innovation that will likely exist whether COVID and social distancing continues. and the world we live in continues to look somewhat like it is now, or like after 9/11, it returns to normalcy very quickly. I think the assessment of a business plan now is subject to a higher level of scrutiny post-COVID, but I think there are ample opportunities in terms of knowing VCs. I've realized on any introduction that a warm lead is always highly preferable to go into an organization or capital raise or make any type of introduction. And I spend a lot of time trying to find those introductions rather than to cold call. So.
Well, it's building that trust, which really takes a long time to do. And yeah, that cold call, not really highly recommended. But talking about that, what advice would you give founders trying to launch in the face of uncertainty?
So rule number one right now, I think that I'm seeing the executives and founders that I consider the strongest utilizing is over communication. And I think as a leader to your staff, to shareholders, investors, I personally have a tendency when I'm under a lot of stress to hunker down and try to solve the problem in my head rather than to reach out. And I think right now reaching out is far more important than ever. Transparency is really the key as a leader or as a founder to build trust and confidence. Among other reasons, people they can't trust you if there's not transparency, and they can't follow you if they don't know where you're going. And by that, in communication, I think what's really important is communicating as more of an investigative reporter and asking lots of open-ended questions, because it's not a one-way street where you're just communicating where you're going. It's gathering knowledge from all around you as to where people are, your stakeholders, et cetera. Yeah. What I read once that was really interesting is HP conducted a survey, probably 10 years old now, but it was about how what might be contrary to some people defined in the remote workplace as a important skill of people working from home. The most effective workers from home weren't introverts that didn't want to be around people. They were extroverts that realized it was critical that they constantly reached out to maintain that connection. And I think maybe some introverts don't want to hear that, but it's even more important when you're home behind your Zoom camera. And just a couple other thoughts on that right now is cash is king. There's no doubt about it right now. I think you need to preserve capital at all costs, and you need to take discounts on a round to get the round in. You can get funded, but easy money is over.
Yep.
I remember in 2008, Sequoia sent a letter that everyone was talking about in the time, and the message was, no one ever regrets making fast and decisive decisions in light of uncertainty, and you got to make these decisions right now. And interestingly, I think 2 weeks ago they sent a similar letter that they've been through this before, and you have to tighten up your balance sheet.
Yep.
And I think that also more than ever, the opportunity to build a product on the fly without a proven market fit, it's just not going to happen. It has to be further along. You have to show that it has a strong fit, not, well, we'll figure out the feature set and how we monetize this on the other side. You have to show some traction.
That's so 2000, right? So
yeah, and the last one that I think we've all been through in some environment in life. pick your partners well. I think downturns and stress, they create tremendous pressure on relationships, and marital relationships, family relationships, founder relationships. And if there's disharmony going in to a startup, there'll be disharmony all the way through the startup. And it's really hard to work through conflict while you're trying to get funding.
Very, very true. So there is an article, or there's one written by me and one written by Richard Sudek, who's the chairman emeritus for TCA, about partnerships that I've been wanting to send out to our audience. So I will send that out in the next couple of weeks. It talks really about how you choose your partners. Talking about cash is king, I got two different questions. What about pushing digital currency? To kind of potentially help with cash is king.
I think that to the extent, whether it's a currency or a blockchain model, to the extent it solves a fundamental problem rather than just being a pile on to a trend, it's very interesting. I think you have to go in with a product that shows how you solve a problem, and as much as there may be certain problems with physical currency or credit cards, that to me, that alone isn't enough to support.
Just another currency is not enough.
A crypto. Having said that, I do think that we will continue to see blockchain integrated in solutions of trust, and cryptocurrencies will gain traction, especially as they're embraced in certain sectors where they solve a problem. Yep.
Okay. Just to remind everyone, we're halfway through the program. You can send your questions in the chat box in YouTube. We have a question from Brian regarding the cash on hand slide, which is pretty shocking. Do you think that this stark reality will create new requirements from VCs to portfolio companies to better track?
Well, I think that as a fund and as a member of Tech Coast Angels, the first thing we're doing is getting our house in order and looking at the portfolio in which we've invested and contacting founders and trying to understand where they are, what they need, and those that have had traction, where we have confidence, we're going to work with them and figure a way through this. So, and that's even more true with companies at the B, C, D level. But absolutely, I think question number one is, what's your burn? What's your runway? How much cash do you have left? And I think one of the hardest things to do as a new founder is to furlough and to eliminate staff. It's just a really emotional decision to make, and I think that's when you need to reach out to your advisors and mentors and have them help you work through it. And then I'd also add, yes, we are now doing a lot more in our due diligence to assess specific COVID risks, including cash positions, and thinking through, what happens if these dollars are your last? What does the future look like? Can you make it across the desert?
Yep. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the fund, so people that are the audience that are here today understand what we do and what we have. So this fund that we have is a yearly fund. Tell us a little bit about how much we have, how many investments we've made, and what are we looking to do at least this year?
Sure. So this year my instinct is we'll come in at 10 to 12 investments. The range is anywhere from as little as $100,000 from the fund alone, and I'll supplement that in a second, to as much as with sidecar of investments. I think that the largest investment we've made historically as an angel network was 2.5 million, and the angel model historically was one that really encouraged individual decisions and yet sharing data across groups. So typically you'd come in and you'd pitch an angel network. Ours works at bi-monthly screenings, and in the room there could be anywhere from 30 to 100 people, and they'd ask you some questions. You'd present, that's called a screening, and you'd be asked Q&A, and then if there's interest, once you step out of the room, we do extensive due diligence, and individuals step up as part of a group. I think increasingly in angel networks, individuals have found that we can be more efficient, both for entrepreneurs and for investing, by working through funds. We can move faster, we can put more money at risk and at work. And also, probably from an angel's perspective, what we found is that probably 10% of angels making 1, 2, 3, 4 investments a year really outperform and have incredible returns. But the vast majority, no matter how smart they are, much experience they have, they would substantially benefit from working together and getting diversification across multiple investments. So the goal, one of the primary goals of the fund, is that you invest on an annual basis, and in, let's say, 3 years, you end up holding a portfolio of 30 to 45 companies that gives you a whole lot of protection, so that if 50% don't make it, and that's not a unrealistic number in terms of failure.
Very realistic, or more.
Yes, and you know, we're seeing it right now. It's not just black swan events, but situations change, macroeconomics changes. Big companies can decide, even though you didn't think they would, to go after your business. And there are things beyond the control of entrepreneurs that puts this money at risk. So we're trying to invest in a broader number of companies, and also a variety of industries, so that we do end up getting exposure at a time like this in healthcare, biotech, life sciences. And if we invested in a travel app, you know, that's probably on hold right now for the most part. So,
yeah. Brian is asking another question. I will answer it quickly. Sometimes we do a special vehicle, but most of the time we do invest individually into the company. So the individuals will show up on the cap table. I have a question from Vasu Sharma. How is the environment for medical device startups, especially the ones that are not directly related to COVID-19? Any insight on that, Jim?
Yeah, I have a thought. I just want to make sure the question before we both answered, which is, as a fund, we typically make an investment, and usually individual investors, both those that have invested in the fund, but also those that haven't, are invited to come along. So oftentimes the fund will make, let's say it's a $250,000 investment, there is often another $250,000 of individual angels, and we like to collaborate and work together. And one other point on that, there's multiple chapters of Tech Coast Angels, and oftentimes some have their own funds. When we see things we really like, we like to work together both with our sister chapters, but also with other angel networks, because working together helps ensure the support of that network. On medical devices, again, I think that the healthcare industry right now, there's no stigma. There's no sense that coming in a resistance to look at something that's in healthcare for COVID or not. And what I'm seeing and what my belief is that that sector will be the most resilient through this. Yeah. And there are subsets to that sector where, maybe you can't do it without social distancing, as an example. But telemedicine, that's inversely correlated to that issue. So it's not, you really need to get granular when you're looking at the opportunities to understand the impact COVID will have.
Yeah. We have a question from Nicholas about the fund activities moving online. With COVID, everything's been online for the past almost couple of months now. So yes, it's moved online just like everybody else. Jim?
Yeah, I think on that, JJ, at our last screening, I'm assuming we broke all records for participation, and the demographic is probably at least half of angels or more are retired, and they tend to be further on in their careers or life. And it's been super interesting to watch the impact where our first screening, crickets, where there wasn't a great participation. And I think we were pretty concerned. And now we're in our second and third screening. And I think we're up from a regular screening where people might not have wanted to jump in their car and drive a half hour. And now that they've figured it out, they're more inclined to participate. So
and by the way, just to let everybody know, we have what we call mobile members that are all over the world and not only here. So we have investors that invest from other parts of the world that are part of Technics Angels as well. So next question for you, talking about investing in companies. I think these are kind of two related questions. One is, in your opinion, what makes the company investable? And then what are the primary characteristics that you look for as Jim Pickell?
So I think everyone has their own secret sauce as we're trying to establish. I'm personally trying to establish how to make diligent more efficient, because it's a tremendous undertaking, and the more rigorous your diligence is, the better your return is as a fund. But it's a tremendous commitment to do a full due diligence. In my personal opinion, I think issue number one always is the people, and it's the team. It's whether they're complementary and have a different set of strengths that complement each other. Age isn't so important, but the ability to lead, including through times like this. The advisors and how active they are, I think, adds a lot to credibility, and just showing that you were able to get buy-in, because people don't like to attach their name to something they don't really believe in. And a lot of times people pin me down and ask whether their idea is fundable. And my response is twofold. One, there's an infinite number of great ideas out there around which you could build a business, but it takes a lot more to get to fundability. And if Bill Gates or Brian Chesky owned that business model and was getting funding, absolutely. Does your team and do you have what it takes to get funding? Time and the diligence process interaction will tell. So, and the other things, I think now more than ever, having a strong product fit with the market. It's not enough to say it's going to go viral, or that's what our marketing is going to be based on, or we're going to get eyeballs and then we'll monetize those later. Really understanding your customer. I personally, when I'm involved in startups, I like solving problems that I share. I love to hear during a pitch a CEO trying to work through an issue they encountered in their own life and they became an expert on and were shocked at how inefficient it was.
Yep.
I remember there was a pitch competition with a young guy from Hawaii and from a huge family. No one had ever gone through college, and then he needed to apply for a scholarship. And, he was trying to build a better way so that people and students in his boat could figure out how to get through that. In the competitive landscape, that's par for the course, that you'll be expected to really understand that. And I think a big turnoff, even if you're adamant that it's true, is saying there's no competition. As I mentioned Peloton earlier, if there was no competition, certainly a gym or a TV program is a competition. So don't say there's none. It's a competition for time. Investors this early really like to see a large enough market size, and oftentimes we'll see an incredible leadership and a great business model, but it's just not interesting enough the impact it's going to have to fund at this level. It's more, friends and family need to support you through, or debt. And then obviously the terms of the deal are important, but I would add one new factor that that I think is being talked about in every context, that businesses are being valued and funding's being discussed. And we as Tech Host Angels, we've added a COVID risk assessment, and it's evolving quickly. It's not it is a deep dive, but the questionnaire itself is 1 page long, but it's really trying to get a better understanding as to what has changed for your business in the last 60 days. Do you need to raise more money? What if these are the last dollars you raise?
What would you do now?
What would you do? The key hires you were about to make, are you still going to make those? Do you need to furlough? Do you need to eliminate one aspect of your model where you're going to go after big pharma?
Yeah.
Right. And I think the focus in general throughout the venture capital community and the angel community has moved away from the frothy, money's easy hyper growth opportunities that will take a while to return, to more modest. This business looks like it can move quickly to cash sustainability. Yeah. That is a really important discussion right now among investors.
So you mentioned something earlier, and I want to go back on that because I see it all the time, where companies come in and they talk about, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6 billion, or sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars of a market. Sometimes they over-exaggerate it to the point that it doesn't make any sense. Do you have to have, as a from an investor standpoint, does a company have to have a $10 billion market before TCA looks at it? Or maybe if it's 500 million, it's still big enough?
Well, as much as I said earlier that, some of the really modest 5-year forecasts don't seem to lend themselves to multiple rounds of funding, frankly. At the same time, I don't think you need a $10 billion market. In fact, what we often like to see is you go into a niche that is interesting and large enough, or an ancillary market where, someone's already built the $10 billion market, and now that's creating ancillary services that can supplement that market, and it opens it to new business plans. And who knows, maybe your experience working in that industry exposed you to the opportunities the big company doesn't have the resources or interest in pursuing right now.
Because it's too small for them.
Yeah. Yeah, for now, and then there's this delicate balance of, well, are they a competitor or are they a likely exit strategy to you? And that's what we really want to get comfortable with. That we want to be convinced that as soon as they see you make traction in the Apple App Store, they're not going to shut you off and offer their own. And that is a discussion.
Yep. Okay. We have about 10 minutes left, so let's talk a little bit about valuations. What are you seeing today when it comes to valuations?
So I think, like I said earlier, public markets are really the leading indicator, and private markets take a while to catch up. We had an enormous pace of deal flow in early stage in the United States in the first quarter of the year. There was a lot of momentum behind that, and yet now when you look at the amount being raised by venture capitalists, for example, the data that I've read is that 10% of the amount raised at this time, or let me restate that, 10% of the funds raised in 2019 have been raised to date at a point when you'd expect more like 33%. So, and it's interesting, there are a lot of funds out there, and the types of funds that have the right to make capital calls, I think all of them made capital calls in the last few months because they want to hone up their cash position for both to survive through to the other side of this. And batten the hatches. I do think a company with traction will receive funding, and there is discussion right now if it had a lot of traction pre-COVID and COVID hasn't killed the model like it has for a few, or put it on hold at least, that momentum can push them over the start line if people are excited enough. I think healthcare, that whole industry is showing itself to be the most interesting and resilient. And that happened pre-COVID though. That was already starting. So that's just continuing. I do think that early stage founders, they tend to focus too much on valuations. And it's easy to say, sitting here as a representative of a fund, but I've been there too, and I understand how important it feels to get that,
both sides, right? So
you don't want to get a stigma that we raised at X, and yet momentum is really important, and you need to establish that momentum. And I feel that people that walked because there was a disagreement over what the valuation was in the first quarter certainly regret it now at the early stage level and venture capital level. And I'm trying to remember the company I just read about that it was a unicorn and they held off, and they're in an industry that's been negatively impacted. So
all right, I got a question from David, TCA OC president. He says, ask about TAM, SAM, and SOM. Hate to see. We will get 1% of a huge market and have $1 billion valuation in 3 years. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that on one level, when you get, I used the analogy to fog lights earlier, and when you get beyond the first few years, the hockey stick is a hockey stick, and a lot of early stage investors understand that there's a lot of speculation involved. Having said that, there's also an assessment of your ability to do critical thinking. And if it truly feels that you're just licking your finger and putting it up in the wind and saying, there's a $3 billion market and all we need is 1%, there's a couple ways. And I've seen a few lists on the 10 things you shouldn't do. And I think one of the quickest ways you can lose credibility is with numbers. and you really need to make sure that you feel confident in any numbers you put forward. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean you need a 90 worksheet Excel model to support what you're doing. A one pager can work, but every single number on that page, the data, the surveys, the conversion rate, what went into your forecasts. If you have 1% of $1 billion market, great. How do you get there? What's the justification? If we only get 1% of this $1 billion market, you've lost a whole lot of credibility.
Yeah. All right. There is a question. I'm going to let David answer that. There's a question about how many companies we see, how many pitch decks, how many people go into screening, pre-screening, then screening. So David, if you can answer that online, that would be great. So we have about 5 minutes left. I'm thinking maybe while I'm doing maybe a closing, maybe you could think of 3 different things or 3 different recommendations that entrepreneurs should really think about, especially when it comes to investability and maybe specifically related to our fund, and maybe your specific recommendation in general on what an entrepreneur should do in general to be successful, not just to be from an investable standpoint, but to really start, build, exit. All right, I'll let you think about that for a minute or so, and I'll do a couple of things for closing. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe right now to the YouTube channel. Also, please follow us on social media. The recording of this YouTube will be available in about 24 hours online. And if you have additional questions that Jim or myself or David, who's been really active online, has not answered, please don't hesitate to email us at pvinfo@pismoventures, and I will forward the emails accordingly, and I will respond to the ones that are directed to me. We have an event every Monday at 11, and so next week I have 2 TCA members and their executive committee members, Volker and Elko, and the subject is financing your venture from a CFO perspective. So don't forget to sign up for that. And then the week after that, or also this week, I should say, we have a program called Sales Mindset for Entrepreneurs. It is on Thursday, April 30th at noon. So you can go to pismoventures.com and click on events to be able to sign up for that if you haven't received anything. And next week, the week after that, we have Lisa, who is the Vice President of TCA OC, who'll be on board talking about marketing specifically. All right, Jim, the last words are for you.
Sure. So a couple thoughts. One, don't underestimate the importance of the human element right now. And I'm often guilty of this myself. I think that some sentiment right now is that we're all in the same boat, and we're just not. We have frontline workers that are putting themselves at risk every day. We have new parents where both have been furloughed. And I think that it's really more important than ever to treat each other with respect, practice empathy, be a good listener. As much as the vast majority of the world has been negatively impacted by COVID, we're all impacted differently, and I think we should be sensitive to this. I'd also say that part of that is reinforcing what I mentioned earlier. Put yourself out there, come out of your comfort zone, over communicate, jump on Zoom calls, learn a new skill, teach someone something, and find ways to engage, especially in things you're passionate about. And maybe that leads to the last one, which is if you are coming at this to solve a problem, it's really contagious when you do share the passion you have for a problem, and that's part of what you're working on. So for me personally, having a company that we're all driven by a mission, it sure makes it a lot easier to recruit people where we're all trying to solve the same problem versus I want to get VC funding and participate in the myth of easy money. It's a hard journey, but it's so much more rewarding if it's a journey through which you find solutions to problems you share with others. So those are a couple ideas I have.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim, very much. I really appreciate being part of this program today. I am sure it was very valuable for our listeners and the entrepreneurs and the startup community. Thanks for taking the lead on the fund. I think it's a great thing. It's a great opportunity for us to invest into companies that probably we wouldn't have invested into. So thanks, Jim, very much, and I will see you online. Bye-bye.
Thanks, JJ. Thanks for hosting, and thanks for everything you do for the entrepreneurial community. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our channel